Because I figured there's not a personality you don't like.
It's the same place where you can control the fuel, like where you can take it down. Just happened. I just got really tired of telling people. It's like, yeah, that's good.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you very much for coming out. My name is Mike Webb and I'm from Civil Beat. We're very excited to be here at Ewa Beach. We wanted to have a series about how to improve education in Hawaii, and we thought that this would be a really great location since James Campbell High is one of the biggest in the state. So tonight we're going to talk about how schools, whether communities should have greater control of the schools, and we're really pleased to have a great panel here tonight. We're hoping one guest will arrive. It's a parent, and in the meantime, oh, you're Frances. Oh, please, I'm sorry. Come on out.
I've been sitting
I never did know your name. So I'm going to introduce our sponsors, the He'e Coalition and the University of Hawaii College of Education and the Hawaii State Teachers Association. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. So Sherry, if you would like to say hello.
Good evening, everyone, and aloha. My name is Sherry Nakamura, and I'm the director of He'e Coalition. For those of you who aren't familiar with the coalition, we're a collection of community organizations and parent groups that are dedicated to help public education through increased family and community engagement. We're delighted to be a sponsor of the series of education conversations, civil cafes on education. And we think that these kinds of intimate gatherings are important for discussing education issues sort of in an in-depth, intimate way. It brings the community closer to education, which is part of our mission. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you panelists for participating, and thank you very much to Civil Beat for hosting these events. I'd like to pass it on now to the University of Hawaii College of Education, Jeff Moniz.
Thank you. On behalf of the students, faculty, and staff at the College of Education at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, welcome. And it's special for me to say welcome because I'm on my home turf. Even though I'm a professor all the way out at Manoa and I have to brave the traffic every day, it's nice to just kind of roll down the hill from home. We're extremely pleased to co-sponsor this important education series, engaging the community in important issues of the day. I would be remiss not to use this opportunity to share some positive things about the University of Hawaii at Manoa, especially the College of Education. The dean wants me to make sure that I use his tagline, "The College of Education is more than anyone knows." We're more than anyone knows. We're responsible for preparing tomorrow's teachers, educational leaders, and researchers. We are the only college at UH Manoa responsible for the full range of levels in education, from preschool through graduate school. We prepare teachers and leaders for public, charter, and private schools. The college has some 350 employees, 2,000 students, 8 academic departments, 2 large research units, and over 25 degrees and certificates. One of our newest degrees is the Doctor of Education in Professional Education Practice, otherwise known as the EDD, and that's the program that I'm currently directing. Enough about me, enough about the college. Thank you for coming, and in the interest of time, I'm handing it over to Alia Wong.
Thank you, thank you. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming on your fall break. I see a lot of educators here, so I know you're sacrificing your time. I'm Alia Wong, I'm the education reporter at Civil Beat, and this is our second installment of the education civil cafes, and this is actually the first one we're holding outside of Honolulu, so it's kind of exciting for us, and it's a bit of an experiment, so thank you for being the guinea pigs in that experiment. Anyways, today's discussion, of course, is about school empowerment, and we keep hearing that term, especially now that the election is at its peak and all the gubernatorial candidates are referring a lot to school empowerment and decentralizing the DOE. So I thought we'd start off with a bit of a philosophical question, the age-old question in Hawaii. How can we run our school system a little differently? And a lot of you probably know, I see a lot of teachers, a lot of administrators, that Hawaii is the only single district state in the country. We're the only state that only has one school district, meaning we're not broken up by a bunch of different school districts. And that, of course, has its advantages, but it also has its shortcomings. And I'm hoping the four of you can help me better understand the strengths of that system and the weaknesses. So we'll start with our parent here, and this is the parent, Frances, and you have 4 kids in the public school system, so we're very excited to have a parent representative. So let's start with you. What do you think about the way our current school system is run and what can be done differently?
Well, first of all, I do have 4 children. 1 is in Campbell, 1 is in Eva Mackay, and the 2 is in elementary school. Unfortunately, there is only one pot that they can all grab funds from. And the thing is, there are not enough parents that are willing to come out to volunteer and put their effort into into the school improvement, such as maintenance, as well as helping out the faculty with paperwork and all those type of things. So there are shortcomings, but eventually we work through it. Yes.
And this is Catherine Payne, and she's probably best well known as as the longtime principal of Farrington High School, but she's since retired and is now the chairwoman of the State Charter School Commission. So she's kind of wearing 2 hats today and can lend insight on both of those issues. But Catherine, what do you think about the way the school system is currently run?
Well, I think one of the things that your topic is local control. And I think that what has happened over the last several years has been the perception anyway in the schools that there's been a lessening of local control. I don't believe we should have a state with many different school districts. I think that is one of the strengths of Hawaii, that we have one school district. It helps us with equity. We're not using property taxes to decide how much funding schools get, where poor communities have less funding than wealthy communities. So I think that's a strength, actually, having one school district. But within our large school district, I think there is a great opportunity to decentralize control, and we can look at what is best handled at the state level, kinds of economies of scale that need to be handled up there, but the kinds of things that would better be handled at districts and complexes and schools are the kinds of programs and the hiring of teachers. Those really need to be decentralized down to school level. And I think over the last few years, much of that decision-making has been moved again up to the top. And schools are anxious to have a shift where control with responsibility is given to them. And I'm hopeful that the future will move back to where we started moving in the 90s, to more local control.
Great, and here we have my pal Al Nagasako. He's the executive director of the teachers union here in the state, the Hawaii State Teachers Association, and I'm sure he has some thoughts on this issue as well. So take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Alia. Good evening, and I'm happy to be here. I used to worked out in Leeward almost all my career. First of all, let me just begin by sharing that I believe that the school, every school, needs to be the hub of the community. And what does that mean? Really, every community is unique, every school is unique. How do we take advantage of the talent, the resources, and the people that we have in each community to not just come and clean your walls and color the tiles, but really, how do we get teachers involved to make curriculum come alive for kids? And the way we do that is, first of all, we have to have some autonomy at the local school level. And to answer Alia directly, yes, we need to have one system to provide equity, but within that system, we need to look at different ways of providing that kind of flexible, that freedom to create something that's important to your school and your community. Standards are standards, but when you have a community that may have, let's say, a larger mix of, let's say, disadvantaged special needs or ELL students, then should our curriculum look a little different from a community that does not? How do we use the resources within our community? If we are indeed the hub, how do we get parents, how do we get businesses to the community to help make our curriculum mean more for our children, for our students? Case in point, business partnerships, not just for the high school, but also for the middle and elementary schools. For example, we run a summer internship, HSTA does, and we have teachers going out into the community, a number of businesses with over 100 teachers participating in that. The purpose of this summer internship is for teachers to see what real world work looks like outside, but also to come back and create curriculum that's meaningful for the children. And when we talk about transformation, educational transformation, we're really talking about taking advantage of the richness of your students' culture, where they come from, what their interests are. If we can hook onto that, and it's unique in every community, will definitely make a bigger difference than we're doing right now, where people think that one size fits all, and it doesn't. So I believe that we do need a large system to make sure we have the resources, but also give districts and possible complexes an opportunity to create what is important. You know, in Act 51, we wanted, years ago in 2005, there was an opportunity to create a K-12 articulated curriculum in every complex. I think that's where we need to go. So the power lies within the school communities to create that K-12 curriculum that everyone can be proud of.
Here we have Suzanne Mulcahy, is that how you pronounce it?
Mulcahy.
Mulcahy. She's the superintendent of schools in the Kailua and Kalaheo complex area, so Windward schools. And what do you think about the way the current public school system is run?
Well, if you want me to answer what I think about the way the current school system is run, we would have to extend this evening to perhaps a week-long retreat together, because that would take a long time to answer. I will say this, I've taught and led in Colorado, California, and Hawaii. So I know what it is to work in a school system where we have districts and school boards. And now I know what it is to work in a school system where we have one state system with a state school board. And there are great things and not so great things about both of those situations. I think the most important thing is it comes back to relationships. We have to work together to create what we need for the unique context of the communities that we serve. And so sometimes, for example, in my area, that might mean the unique context of Kailua Elementary, but it also means the unique context of all of my complex schools, and since they feed into one intermediate, the entire complex area. And if we only come together when there's a big decision to make, or big issue we face, and we don't have a relationship that has given us a foundation, it makes it a lot more challenging. And so we spend a lot more time trying to figure out who we are and how we feel instead of addressing the needs that our students have. And that really should be at the center. So there are strengths. I would agree with Catherine Payne that the fact that we have one school system is a strength of Hawaii. I would also say it's a weakness. And I believe that as a principal, when Act 51 was passed, I was so thrilled that I would have an opportunity to have a school community council and that we could work together to create the program that we needed at the school that I was leading. I remembered that we planned, we trained on how to hold elections because we thought that we'd have so many people coming, we really need to make sure that we handle it appropriately. And in the end, I ended up asking people if they would please be willing to consider to be put on the ballot. And I realized that maybe we really don't understand yet, and I'm actually researching this right now, what it means to be engaged with a school. Because I think sometimes as leaders, we aren't really sure what we need when we say, we want you to engage with us. We want to go beyond involvement to engagement. And because we don't really understand, sometimes we don't communicate it very well to our families and communities. But if we can come together and have a relationship, then maybe we can start to figure out what does it mean when you're engaged with the school and helping. So right now, what I'm asking of my principals is that they go back to look at what we talked about with school community councils and how empowering it felt to sit down with parents and community members and create school improvement plans. And as a principal, how wonderful it was to know I had teacher leaders helping, I had classified staff helping, I had community, I had parents, and it wasn't all on me because they better knew the many facets of my unique community. And so I think that there's a balance. I think that you can have one school system, but you can still allow for those unique things to happen in each area.
One, which was known as the Reinventing Education Act, and that was actually passed. And I was still a student myself, as before my time as a reporter, but still hear a lot about it. It was a pretty extensive piece of legislation, but what it did in large part was try to equalize the funding. So basically base funding on students' needs rather than just on sheer enrollment numbers. And also, like Suzanne referenced, it created these school community councils. So these councils that basically gave more empowerment or aimed to give more empowerment to the schools to enact decisions, enact policies for the school. But a lot of people have told me, it was a missed opportunity, that hasn't really gone according to plan. And I want to ask maybe our parent first, how engaged do you feel in the decisions that are made at your school, your children's schools?
I can say that there is a disconnect here in the Campbell Lake complex. I can say that parents don't feel involved in reinventing education in Act 51. We don't know enough about what's happening in the schools. Yes, there's bulletin boards, bulletin and newsletters that come out, but in the school, what happens, they do not know anything about what happens.
So anyone over to her left, I'm sure you guys hear this a lot from parents feeling like they feel somewhat disenfranchised from their children's education. What can be done to maybe improve that situation and give parents more of a say in what happens in the classroom?
I'll speak to that just a little. I think one of the things, and Suzanne mentioned, it's always have a really good grasp on what it means to be involved. And parent involvement is that phrase that we use, but we're not good at telling people what that means. And it's so much more than just showing up for the PTA meeting or showing up for Clean the Campus Day. for me as a principal and working in a community where parents didn't have the time because they were working several jobs, many of them, to show up necessarily when we had meetings or when we had open house. The challenge was really to find and redefine different ways for parents to be involved. And we did that with varying degrees of success through our smaller learning communities. And we asked the academies at Farrington, because we divided the school into 12 academies, to come up with their own ways for parents to be involved. And sometimes that would come and learn and hear from your child about what they're doing in the school, so that the children, the students would share with their parents about things that they were learning. And that was a way for communication with the parent and the student, and also a practice kind of way for the child to really reinforce what they were learning. Some of my elementary colleagues said, you know, if we could just help parents understand that if they could send the children on time with a breakfast inside of them, you know, that would be a huge bit of parent involvement that would make a difference for their children. So outreach to parents in different ways, sending outreach workers to talk with parents in the home. These are things, they take time, they take personnel, they take careful thought, but it's, you know, we talk about differentiating for children when they're learning, doing different things because of different needs. We have to do that with parents and community people too, because everyone has a different perspective of what their role is in education with their children and their schools. So schools have to really take some time to think about that and do that kind of outreach.
I have a couple of things.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we have a slogan in our area that parent involvement creates an additional burden on the school, but parent engagement lightens the load. So if the school is the one that's always creating the activity, and we're concerned about how many and who's making the shortbread and who's mixing the pog and who's greeting the people, it all comes back to the school. And then the parents and community members are only spectators. And if you want them to be engaged, then you have to figure out how to communicate what Catherine is talking about and what our parent is talking about. I think to a certain degree, we have to welcome parents and community and help start to provide some level of understanding of what our task is and what we need them to do. We have to create a foundation for them. We have to listen. And maybe if we listen to what they have to say, we'll realize that the path we were going down that we thought we should follow and we were going to teach them about isn't really the path that we should follow. I also think that in order to listen, educators have to be willing to take a risk. So whenever you learn, whether you're preschool and on up, you have to be willing to take a risk. Learning is a scary thing because you have to become transparent. You have to kind of be willing to let your ideas be known, and maybe someone won't agree with you. So you have to take a risk. And so I think that we have to create an environment where families and communities can come in and say what they think, and we can take down the shield or the big wall that we've created as educators and be willing to listen, and likewise begin to have some sort of an exchange. And one last thing, I know I said 2, I really can't count, but I'm going to go to 3, okay? And I think too often we wonder how we can get folks engaged in our school by bringing them to our school. But maybe depending on the unique context of the community, we need to go out to the community, meet people where they are, especially if they have 2 or 3 jobs, if they're not able to have childcare. We are in the helping careers, right, where we care about people. And sometimes we have to make it a little easier, or it might appear like we really don't care to engage when we really do.
So let's talk a little bit about school reform, and that's another big term we keep hearing about. You hear about Common Core, that infamous as the teacher evaluations that have been pretty controversial in the state. You have the strategic plan, which is the state initiative to reform the public education system here. So how much of a say do you feel like you have in the curriculum your children learn, the standards, what is being done to try and improve their education, but maybe isn't going forward as planned?
If you're gonna ask me what the general learner outcomes is, I have no idea what that is. I can say that I attend every parent-teacher meeting, conferences in elementary, but why is there none during intermediate, middle school, and high school? And if these performance evaluations do come from a parent's view, I would love to at least do one part of it in the Campbell Complex area.
Catherine, what do you think about Common Core, the teacher evals? They're all kind of interconnected. What do you have to say about that?
I'm thinking, like Suzanne, you have a week of a seminar here. I think Common Core is not really shocking. You know, people, there's so much controversy around Common Core, but I think if we could simplify it down to nationally, we need to assure in our schools in America that kids have a baseline of understanding. I think where it's gotten, we've gotten carried away more with all of the assessments that we're doing, and people feel like they have to teach to those specific assessments to the extent that we're not teaching some other things. You know, Common Core doesn't necessarily include the arts, and that's been a great loss for some schools. We need to find a balance in what we're doing and assure that our students are getting some basic information, but it shouldn't be to the detriment of the joy of learning and the joy of teaching and the experience that students get with critical thinking and writing and reading, all that. So I think, you know, we have to continue to work with it. It's a new thing. And I think teacher evaluations, I'm out of the system now, so I haven't worked with the current evaluation, but I know that the model they're using was actually originally meant to be a professional development model. And so it concerns me that we're using a professional development model as an evaluation model, because those are two separate things. And I think that's one of the problems that teachers are faced with this model. And it's very time intensive, and there's not a lot of research that I've read that shows that this is a way to get better instruction in the classroom. And with all school reform, whether it started in the 17, 18, 1900s or the 2000s, what makes the biggest difference for children in the classroom and their learning is that relationship between the teacher and the student, and how that teacher chooses the best kind of instruction for the child. And that's what we need to get back to. That's really the best kind of school reform.
And Al, what does the HSTA think about these two things?
Before I get into my diatribe, let me just share that I would like to offer Catherine Payne a job with the union. She says all the right things.
Take note of that.
But I gotta get her past the charter schools right now. Common Core, it's good to get standards, no question. We need to have standards out there that we can use as guides. In and of itself, what Hawaii has done with the Common Core, really, the implementation of Common Core is done poorly. The training and the resources that's required for teachers aren't there. You cannot force fit Common Core. It's a new paradigm in teaching and learning. Common Core really asks students to demonstrate what they've learned in more than just paper pencil. It really talks about kids doing projects to show how much they've learned. Project-based learning, they have this thing called inquiry learning, where you throw a question out and you have kids research, take a position, defend it. It takes a lot of training. When I opened Kapolei High School, we were a project-based learning school. And I was there for 10 years, and we're just getting our hands wet. We're just learning how to do it right. And to be successful in Common Core, it's gonna take a while. It's gonna take a generation. So to tie that into teacher evaluation is wrong. Educational transformation is not teacher evaluation. Educational transformation is creating rigorous and relevant. That means it means something to the kids' education. We got to get better at providing that. Remember I talked a little earlier about being culture-based, place-based, respecting and honoring the culture from which many of our youngsters have come from, and knowing the number of immigrants that are coming to Hawaii and across the country. We got to get better at understanding how to best work with these different populations. There's no question we want kids to go to college, but John Dewey said in 1904, some consider him the father of public education, the best way to get a kid into college is through vocational education. Why? Because it was hands-on. It gave kids a reason for wanting to get more education and learn how to milk a cow and milk a whole herd of cows or whatever it is. But it's a way we got to get them. We're not doing a good job. Common Core in and of itself are good targets. They're high goals, but the implementation piece got to be well thought through, and we're not doing a good job. And we should never tie teacher evaluation to something that's not proven. So that is my position. Pretty clear, right?
It's pretty clear. I don't know if you want to chime in or if we can maybe transition a little bit, but I'm still.
If you want.
Sure. So the Gates Foundation, which was the organization that basically bankrolled the Common Core standards, recently called for a moratorium on the use of the standards in high stakes decisions such as teacher pay, which Al referenced, and student test scores and things like that. And but Hawaii hasn't really followed suit. We're still using them. We're still using the assessments that are aligned to those standards. And it's really come to head in recent months. Teachers are upset that they feel like their salaries are being tied to these standards they don't understand. Parents feel like they have no say in how these standards affect how their students or kids are performing. And there's this detachment between people who are maybe the real stakeholders in the kids' education, people who are at the state level. What can be done to really reconcile those two different, goals? Maybe Suzanne.
Okay. Well, I was going in a different direction and now you've asked a different question, so let me recalibrate.
Sure.
First of all, I always am kind of baffled when someone says, not just you, but anyone says, ... and the parents and community didn't have a say in what the kids were learning. I can't remember a time in the 33 years that I've been in education where we really did bring in families and communities to say, what do you think the kids should learn? And I guess I can't wrap my mind around that process and what we would do and how that whole thing would work. But what I heard from the parents in my community is that they want their kids to have a very rigorous education. They want an education that integrates literacy across the curriculum because, for instance, my daughter, who was a great creative writer and then became the newspaper editor at Kalaheo, then became a scientist, completely different type of writing, right? And so they're talking about literacy across the area. And we see that happening with the Common Core. Now, we started 4 years ago because this CAS said, I know we don't have to do it until several years from now, but let's start training. And we worked with Kamehameha schools because we didn't have the capacity to provide the professional development required for our teachers to do, as Al described, really some intensive professional development. So in our area, I have not talked to all the teachers, of course, but we do evaluations at our instructional leadership teams every month. And they evaluate us and what we've provided. And what we are hearing is, at this point, even though there's still so much to learn, they believe that the courses are more rigorous, that we are really focusing on critical thinking and inquiry. We have a strong component of reading and writing across all curricular areas, which is not new, but perhaps just more focused. And the opportunity for interdisciplinary units, problem-based learning, place-based learning has been more apparent in our schools, K through 12. So our career and tech ed programs, which I also think Al or Catherine mentioned, go preschool through high school now with our career pathways. And we have in one pathway, natural resources that we kicked off, we have over 35 partners that are working with us, everything from field trips to internships. So we're seeing it taking off. Now, let me be candid with you. We all have a lot of gashes and scars and bruises over the process because we're talking about what we're going to teach our students and we're talking about some instructional shifts. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I have a lot of teachers in my area and across the state, I'm sure, who were already teaching this way, who already had rigorous classrooms, who already had engaged their students. So, you know, it isn't a brand new thing. I think after 33 years, I still haven't seen a brand new thing yet. But what could we have done different? Maybe we could have had a better plan about how to implement it and how to provide professional development, how to communicate to the parents. We just now created something with the support of Hey and Sherry Nakamura and some other groups. We created a Common Core video, which you can see on the DOE website from our area. However, when I look at the fact that education today looks a lot like it did when I was in school, maybe we couldn't have taken as long as educators generally take to implement something new. So did we go fast? Yes, we were racing to the top. Could we have gone slower? Yes, but at what expense? Because should my grandchildren have to wait for the grown-ups to figure it out before we implement it? I don't have time to wait for that. I have, you know, I see different facets. So I could go on, but I'll stop.
A lot of these questions we could go on about. Anyone else want to chime in?
I just wanted to make one point, and I think it picks up on what Suzanne was saying, where they started 4 years ago, and many schools are just starting now. And we have a history in the department of starting and stopping and starting and stopping, all these different things. And I think we haven't given Common Core enough time to be refined to fit what we need here. And what the Gates Foundation, my understanding is not that they are saying moratorium on Common Core, but they are saying slow down on the massive assessments that are happening because of this, because we haven't really developed Common Core instruction with enough detail and to really create good assessments. And there are some for-profit companies that are cranking out assessments that they want us to buy, which we have. But we also need to understand that this year is the first year that they're going to be giving those tests. So we haven't even tried those tests out yet, really, across the state. So Gates is saying don't rush so fast on the tests, really build the curriculum and the teacher training, and don't tie teacher pay to performance on these tests that haven't really been validated either. So I think that's an important piece. We need to stick with it, I think, for a little while longer.
So now we are implementing those in the next semester, and they will be high stakes. They will affect teacher pay. They will.
That's why it's important to keep talking about it, because no decision is so far gone that it can't be pulled back a little bit.
So a recent group of retired principals came out with this survey that showed what appears to be great dissatisfaction among leadership at the school level with what's happening in the state office. And there's a great fear of retaliation for speaking out. There's a sense that they can't really innovate at all at the school level. Do you think those concerns are valid? Do you think that what they said, they actually said that the DOE basically needs to overhaul its leadership, and not to point at fingers at anyone, but they did seem pretty dissatisfied with the superintendent. Do you think that concern really holds any water, or what do you think, Al?
Thanks for the question. If you think the principals are afraid of retaliation, imagine what the teachers feel like at the school level. I feel sorry for principals, quite honestly, because they're stuck in the middle. They're getting pushed by the teachers to say, hey, slow this down, we're dying. And then the principal's got to manage what's coming down from the top to say, we got to get these things done at the school. So you got to lose-lose. You don't have a win-win situation here because first of all, it's based on what I believe is some wrong steps. Educational transformation is not about teacher evaluation. It's really about changing the way we do things in schools. And the only way you can create that is through a collaborative process, but it's easier said than done. Collaboration doesn't just happen. Collaboration begins with trust building. It's the fact that when you put your neck out there, you got your back, and people got your back because they believe. First of all, they believe in why you're doing what you're doing. If you cannot believe in why you're doing what you're doing, it's hard to look back and get support. So the belief, there's certain core beliefs that I think both teachers and principals feel are key, critical for us. And just my personal perspective is that we've lost the vision for the whole child. Where there's so many special needs kids out there, there's so many ELL kids that do not benefit from whatever results that are reported in the assessments. Some of these kids need to transition to Goodwill, they need to transition to supported employment. Who advocates for them? Who stands up for them? Is it the community now that can organize and stand up and say, this is not good for these kids, we're hurting these kids? How do we organize our community to get voices for this population, to get out and fight for what's right? There are true stories about kids receiving, knowing when they're having their test results, get sick to their stomach, hide in the bathroom, cut school, cry, because they know what the score is going to look like. But no kid, no teacher, no principal believes that we should be punishing or hurting kids. But we keep doing it, and I don't know why we keep doing it. We gotta fight for those kids. Somebody's gotta stand up for them. It's just, I know so many families who have kids that have shared with me, why are they taking, right now the test is gonna take 4 hours? And for some of these youngsters who should be learning to catch the bus to get to their next work assignment, why put kids through that? Now you talk about different ways of advocating for kids, different ways of organizing your communities. This is this is an issue that resonates with everyone. What do you think many of the Micronesian, the Chuukese kids don't come to school when you have testing? I mean, they don't. Why put kids through that? Now, who can fight for our kids? Who from the ELL community? Who from teacher ranks can fight for these kids to say, this is wrong. We don't believe that we should be hurting kids. And now that's on one side. So you know my personal bias is that we're not addressing the needs of our children. And unfortunately, the test really focuses on the kids. The 55 by 25, that means 55% of our kids are going to go to college by the year 2025. That's good for maybe, so many kids. What about the rest? What do we do for the rest of the kids? Does teacher evaluation and this whole reform address all kids? Sometimes I think not. Sometimes I think we kind of leave them on the side. We need to fight for them, we need to advocate. And again, I have some strong feelings because, first of all, I'm a special ed teacher by trade, but also I've worked with kids that are disengaged completely because school is not relevant. How do we get them back? And it's not by more drill and kill and test prep. It's by really creating relevant instruction for them. I so believe in that. And both Catherine and I have worked in the poorest neighborhoods and poorest communities. And we know firsthand that kids will come to school because number one, they like the teacher, and number two, they're having fun in school. So how do we create that environment for our children? And it's not the way what's happening right now. We need to change that.
So how do we do that? Suzanne, you asked a lot of questions there, and I'm sure they weren't just rhetorical, they were real questions.
I'm always a little bit concerned about generalization. Sometimes we generalize about state organizations, or in this case, the department or a complex area. And that's kind of tough for me because while Al didn't say anything that I haven't heard before, I also know an opposite story. And I think it depends on the particular area, the leadership in the area, the leadership in the school, the manner in which the school leader empowers the teachers and allows the teacher leaders to help with those decisions. We just started a pathway that will allow me to realize a dream in our area, which is when I shake hands to congratulate a high school graduate, they also have an opportunity to earn an associate's degree. So I shake their hand and say, congratulations, you graduated from Kalaheo High School, and now here's the chance to present to you your AA. Powerful. I mean, I'm excited about that. And it's amazing the students who are stepping up and saying that they want to do that. I would venture to say that some of the students might be students that folks would have thought never would have wanted to go to college or do something like that. But what is happening? Teachers are creating meaningful, relevant, engaging lessons, hands-on, build it, dance it, chant it, sing it, do whatever you need to do, even in high school. And they're doing internships and they're seeing what it will look like in the real world. And so they are exceeding our expectations. Now, also, we have internships with our special needs students because we are teaching them to ride the bus and get jobs. And one of the best things that ever happened was standing on a high school campus wondering, why is this group standing here looking out of the fence? Why aren't they in class? Well, they were there because their classmate had graduated and he was on his way to work at the place he interned that had just hired him. Special needs student, catching the bus, doing everything we had time to do. And the class was there with the teachers celebrating the fact that their classmate had made it and was going to work. So I see the other side of that. I think that it's the teachers who are doing this, and they need to be given time to articulate. They need to be given time to have conversations, not just with the department, but interdisciplinary, parents, community, leaders, because they're the ones that will help us figure out how to make it work. Not me in my office, and probably not a principal in their office, but I think that getting back to your question, what do you think about what a group of principals said in a survey? Well, I don't know. What was it, a group of principals? I don't know the parameters with which that survey was set up. I don't know the end number. I don't know how many people said things. I do know enough to know that there are some people who are upset, right? But I think that it would be hard for me to base decisions on a survey that I don't really know, what the controls on that were. Maybe College of Ed would be able to talk about that more in the statistics class. But it's kind of hard to just throw a survey out there and then base decisions on that. Do we need to talk more? Yes. Do we need to be transparent, candid, and genuine? Absolutely.
It's good to be skeptical. And I should add that in a bit we're going to have questions from the audience, so get prepared for those and ask hard questions. But maybe we can transition a little bit and talk about solutions. And we actually had some questions from the audience, and they're pretty related. So I'll ask you, the first question was, what can teachers do to make parents less wary of getting involved and really being more of a decision maker in what happens in the classroom? And the second question was, what does this mean for the role of parents in the education community? So what do you think can be done, proactively as a parent to really change the course of what we're talking about here, and maybe make parents more of a key player in the classroom?
Okay. Well, these are just some ideas that I just thought of. The state board wants, requires students to have so many hours of education. Why not put hours for parent involvement in classrooms, meaning why don't they go on field trips, assist with classroom time, just address those type of things. Why not the state board actually try to address parent participation with the schools, with parents in the schools, and require parents before that a child graduates, the parent must invest so much hours of time with the school or the community.
And I did want to ask you, because you do have kids in schools in this area, and we have been hearing about how hot they are, and how the DOE's hands are tied because they don't have the money to fund AC or other cooling methods. But you get I've been getting a lot of response from people saying that there are other options out there. You can reach out to private foundations, that you can seek grant money, that you can't solely rely on the state's general fund to get these kinds of things done. How can a parent sort of incite action on the hot classrooms issue?
Okay, I want to point this out. There was a time during this year's legislature that the air condition went out, and they could not perform, and they want the students to perform in this weather, but yet they don't want to allocate the funds for it, and yet they say they have so much other items. Why don't the legislators project more private businesses to invest into the schools? There's no reason why Campbell High School that cannot have a photovoltaic. I mean, the sun is always here 90% of the time. There's no reason why air conditioning should not be there if there's photovoltaic.
And Catherine, on this issue, or even more generally, what can parents do, teachers do, school level leaders do to really enact change at the school level?
Well, I think much of change occurs when there's a critical mass of people and voices. And I'm looking at Mr. Rosen-Lee here, and he's an example of getting the issue out. It doesn't always happen really quickly, but I don't think we'll ever go back to a point where the DOE is saying that no, air conditioning is not even on our radar. I think air conditioning is coming. I hope that it will happen sooner rather than later, but it took leadership at this time at the teacher level to really galvanize a lot of voices. And that's, the lone voice can sometimes make a difference, depending upon what that voice is saying and who's listening, but lots of voices make a difference much faster and get people's attention. They get legislators' attention, get governors' attention, and people need to come together as communities. When you talk about, again, this is about community involvement and community empowerment. Communities that come together and speak as one voice, deciding what that priority is and really pushing till they get it. That's what will make a change.
When I was had the opportunity of being a principal at Nanakuli, we did not have a cafeteria. Something wrong with that, so I invited the business guys and the board guys to come have lunch one day, and they're eating in the classroom, and the wind blows, and they all got to cover their food, and that's not right. And so what we did is we mobilized the community. I had kids and parents go to the legislature and testify. And lo and behold, in the interior. But there are many opportunities for involvement. We have many of our parents that were strong in automotive detailing. What if they'd come and they'd be teaching alongside some of our instructors. We had Saturday classes where students and their parents would be learning from an auto body repair person from the community college. There's tons of different ways. We've got parents who work in retail and marketing. They come and make the classroom come alive by creating these projects in the classroom. So there's a number of ways. It's not your traditional come to PTS and let's have pizza. Really, if we be creative, and we also, like I said a little earlier, we got to advocate for what's right for some of our special needs children. You look at the data, we don't have enough supports for these kids in our own community. Where do they transition to? Those are all issues that we can get our people involved with. And that's real meaningful. It doesn't matter your educational level. It doesn't matter, where you're from. It's really how passionate you are about helping children. That's just some of the examples that I wanted to share.
Suzanne.
We've created a parent academy in our area, and kind of organically, we have come to these expectations. And that is, at the beginning of each year, we have a focus group of parents and community, students, teachers, and principals. And they talk about what they think the hot topic issues are that we should provide to parents and community. And once we have gone through and gleaned the top 5 or 6, then a member of parent and community, students, teachers, and administrators must co-create and co-present that particular parent academy session, because we don't want to invite people to come and listen to what I call the DOE talking head. We have plenty of opportunities for folks from the DOE to talk, but we need to allow other opportunities to share about those topics. And so we have used that kind of as a pattern as to how we can find solutions. Because when we come together to plan, we are all equals. There isn't a principal that oversees a parent or a community member. They're all people who care deeply about the children and young people of that community, and they're coming together to figure out how they can solve some of the problems and do so in a parent academy. But then if we stopped there and said, and now all of you have to come and listen to this presentation, then we really wouldn't be listening, because some people cannot. They don't have transportation, they don't have babysitting. So we also are creating a digital library. So I think I talked about it before. It's the relationship and being willing to listen and being courageous enough to accept things that may be uncomfortable to hear. And then instead of going away to your office by yourself and trying to figure out how to solve it, engaging with those people to continue to work through the process so you can have a solution. Those are the best solutions.
Well, let's open up the question. You can come up, or you can ask it from there and I'll repeat it. How about that?
I'd like to find out how you feel about tonal choices and the process that has become tonal choices.
All right, well, the notorious Pono Choices curriculum, which is the pilot sex ed curriculum that schools have the option of using, it sort of became more controversial with same-sex marriage passage, and has some references to gay relationships and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a touchy subject, but the man in the audience wants to know what you guys think about that curriculum.
And the process.
And the process by which it's sort of ensued since its development. Do you have any thoughts on it as a parent?
Yeah. So none of my children have talked about sex ed at this point, so I really have nothing.
Do you have any kids in middle school?
I do have a son in middle school right now, and they haven't talked about Pono choices.
Yeah, and I am not connected with that curriculum, and I haven't read it. So I'm just going to speak a little bit in general about maybe a lesson learned in all of this. It clearly is a very controversial curriculum. And I think one of the things that the department has learned in all of this is that when you are rolling out something like this, it's not enough to just talk about it in generalities. You have to really let the public know, let the parents know, and to get people involved. And I think the process now that they have backtracked a little bit and recognized that this is a very hot topic is to get a group together, and I know one person anyway that is a parent that is on that committee now that the DOE has formed, and they are looking at it, and they have set some different procedures in place. And generally, from what she has told me about the curriculum, most people are in agreement that most of what is in there is important for children to know, and it's really about protecting their health and their future. But some of the issues that are coming up are things that needed to be talked about in depth with parents before they were shared with the children. And so I think that's maybe the lesson learned in all of this.
Well, we don't have any schools in our area who accepted an opportunity to use Pono Choices. So I didn't know what it was when I read about it in the newspaper. But I did tell my principals that because it had not been reviewed, because I had not seen a copy, and because they had not seen a copy, and that's because it doesn't belong to us because it came from an outside group, that I would not give permission for them to use it. But that would allow time for the process to happen, and it took a while. But beyond that, whether it's Pono Choices or any other kind of curriculum, what I shared with the leadership team at the state and what I shared with principals, once an educator, always an educator, and I used it as a teaching opportunity. When a teacher comes excited about a curriculum and asks if they can teach that curriculum, meet with them multiple times to talk about why that, and go through it every single page, turning the page and asking the questions. And then you can better understand what the teacher is teaching. You better know how to support and get more resources for them. But you never have to wonder when you put your head on the pillow at night what might be shared with students. And so in our area, we aren't using Pono Choices. We do teach sex education. The principals and I do know the curriculum, and it's not just one particular curriculum that we purchased. But I've still today never actually seen a copy of the curriculum, since it is not adopted, if you will, by the department, and it isn't sent to all schools.
Well, that might be a good example of parents feeling like they're disengaged from the curriculum that their children are learning. Another question. Yes, Corey, glad to hear from you.
Today we've talked about national curriculum and national standards. We've talked about evaluations on teachers and standardized test scores. But one of the big questions that I think we've been missing is, the trend has been recently to take power away from teachers, to not trust them. And if you've seen some of the best school systems around the world and even our own state, one of the things they do is they trust their teachers to decide the assessment curriculum. When the evaluation came, the principals are screaming and shouting, then they did something. The teachers have been screaming and shouting for months before that, and no one listened. So how do we go to a point now where we go better to start listening to teachers, empowering them in their classrooms?
The question was, how do we start empowering teachers in the state and giving them more say in what they teach their students? Al, since you're the teacher union rep.
We negotiate a very good contract that doesn't tie evaluation into pay, is what we do. But schools that have a good relationship with the principal, by that I mean they trust the principal, there's collaboration going on. From our side, from the union side, we do not receive the kind of grievances that we get from places where maybe the relationship between the principal and the teachers might be a little more rocky. But we can show you the data where the good relationships happen. We don't get that kind of pushback as much as from other schools. But Corey brings up a really good point. You can't just say you better trust teachers, or you can't say you better collaborate. They don't know how that happens. You gotta learn how to do that. You gotta go through and learn that process. When Catherine and I many moons ago were principals, we had school community-based management, where many of the decisions and all exceptions had to be vetted by not just teachers, but also by the community. And you talk about genuine engagement, I know, Catherine, we talked a little bit about it before the session started. It really put a lot of responsibility and decision-making with the teachers. But it can't happen without the collaboration of the principals. Catherine, you might want to add to some of that thinking.
You know, what I think about this is that leadership is really the key to this. And it's leadership not only at the principal level, but it's a principal that understands that a school is successful only when that principal is able to give leadership away to others. And we are not, in my opinion, developing the kind of leaders at the teacher level and the principal level right now that understand that leadership is not about power, leadership is about empowering others. And most successful schools have a great many teacher leaders who have the autonomy to make decisions for their programs and to help make decisions about what is going on at the school. And we really need to shift our culture back to where that is a priority and where we have a system for teacher leadership to develop and where teacher leaders can, I think, help to evaluate and support their colleagues and their younger colleagues, where you have master teachers that work with beginning teachers and really are connected to the process of evaluation more intimately than people who are not so connected to education. So it's really, how do we get back to really developing quality leadership at all levels in our schools?
Corey, I am so proud of the teacher leaders in my area. I would like you to come hang out with them. You would like them. And there are different models, as you know. But the one we have used is instructional leadership teams, and there are other complex areas using it. I think maybe we're the first to start, so we're the grandparent of the group. And the best example, it's shared distributive leadership, and the principal does not make the decision based on data and conversation and guided visits and things. We come together to decide. It's not an elite group. There aren't any perks to be on the leadership team, and it should transition as more teachers are empowered and step up. But I think the best example of the success would be a high school that was in restructuring and previously had been given, what are those called? I forget because we don't use them in, outside providers. And the teachers were upset because they had no voice. They were muzzled and they were being told this is what you do and how you do it. But these are people who didn't come from Hawaii, who didn't know our kids, didn't know what we needed. And frankly, it was a bit offensive. And so I will never forget the day that those teachers said to me, we don't want to use this. And I said, well, me either. I didn't choose it. And I said, what do you think we should do? And they sat there and figured out what I'll call a restructuring plan for the school and presented it to the principal, and the principal accepted it. And in the first Strive High result, they were the #1 high school in Strive High in the state, Kalaheo High School. That plan that led the school to being the top one in Strive High was developed by teachers, and not just the ones in that group. So there are many models. But as Catherine says, the leader has to understand the importance of it and then find what model, what system will work, and then consistently utilize that. I wouldn't want to be a principal or leader any other way.
You have another question? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Cindy Kay, and I've been involved in PTA, PTSAs. I've had 8 children that have gone to public schools at various times. My 3 youngest ones all graduated from public schools. So, I've been around. I substitute teach currently, and I'm currently on 3 PTSAs and an SEC. So I'm involved and I'm engaged in a number of schools. Campbell is just the latest in string. I'm proud of our engagement at Campbell, but my concern is that as I watched my children go through school and I thought back to my own public education here in Hawaii, at that time, PTSA was important to schools, and schools supported it, and teachers talked about it, and they encouraged parents to join, and they joined, and parents and teachers regularly met together 2 or 3 times a year at least to talk about what was going on in the classroom. Then the state decided, in their infinite wisdom, to start with these, you know, the community management and SECs, and somehow or another, what was communicated to us parents was, these are replacing PTA and PTSA. Well, they never can, because those organizations are part of the school. PTSA stands apart. So when you're talking about parent engagement, my input would be, let's get PTA and PTSA back into a relevant position in our schools. And what can the schools do to help accomplish that? How can school administrators and teachers make them more relevant? Because that will get parents engaged. That's what happened at Honolulu. We had riots. The helicopters came in, and the leadership team said, parents, if you want a voice, go to PTSA. They will field those questions. We will interface. You know, that year over 100 parents joined PTSA. And it was a vibrant group for the whole time that I was there. Now the leadership team is wishy-washy again. We don't have many parents again.
So what happened to PTSAs and PTAs, and how can we, you know, revive them and rejuvenate their role in the school?
Well, okay. We had a hard time at Farrington with that. I think high schools in general have a really hard time getting parents involved because sometimes the kids are saying, you know, stay away. We found, again, it's such a big school as Campbell is, that we had so many more parents come when our academies formed their own parent groups. And then parents, it was much more personalized. They had a real connection to their child who was in the culinary academy, and they would do things related to that when the parents would come. So we had a much greater turnout of parents for things like that, rather than when we tried to just have a general PTA meeting. I think parents, I really liked your comment about engagement versus involvement, because involvement, just showing up for a meeting and signing in, and we can say we had so many parents come and they're paying their dues. That's, you don't really feel like you're making a contribution to the school when you're doing that, but on a smaller level, and you really get to know the teachers in your child's learning community. That, I think, is much more effective, and it comes back again to your talk about relationships. You know, how do you need to feel like you're somehow connected, not just part of a big organization.
I enjoyed the PTSAs. They used to get the insurance for us for all our field trips and activities. And but on the other hand, turnout wasn't as where we wanted. So we tried exactly what Catherine did and looked at smaller learning communities and asked them to get the parents involved. It tripled the number of people who showed up.
One thing that Campbell is doing is we have formed standing committees in the PTSA that address certain interest groups. For instance, we sponsor the Band Boosters, which is a very active organization. We've been reaching out to some of the other groups on campus to try to work in the same area. For a while, we were talking about a collaboration with the robotics program, was another one. And we've reached out to the athletic department. We've reached out to Project Brad, is something that PTSA always sponsors and picks up the insurance. So, and I think maybe administrators just are not aware of all that. I don't know, but somehow or another, we're not getting that. The encouragement, I guess. And parents feel like they're being pushed out of the classroom, as our parent person has expressed.
Suzanne, what has your experience been like with PTSAs and in your complex area, PTAs, parent groups?
Well, they're still alive. We call them little but mighty, because there's never a lot of people. There's a book that was put out about 15 years ago called Bowling for One. People aren't joiners anymore. And I think, especially in Hawaii, with the number of jobs our parents have to have and the commutes some of them make, it makes it very difficult for them to join the PTSA. But I deeply value each school's. When I was at Kailua Intermediate, I could not have survived without my little but mighty PTSA that took on some very big tasks. So I hadn't heard that rumor that PTAs were out and SCCs were in, because they do have two very different roles. And so your question is, how can we encourage more PTAs? So this is what I have to say about that. Somebody as passionate as you, and I'm sure there are others who are as well, meeting with the principal to say, here are the things that we would like to do, and this is how we want to support you. Read their academic plan, find out what kinds of things they need that would help them, especially in a time of budget restriction, and we're trying to really stay living within our means. And then the PTA or PTSA or PTO or Ohana Club, whatever you call them, they are the communicators of PTA. So how can you dovetail on the activities of the school? Not just, I know you're doing all this already, but how can you then become the spokesperson to say, hi, we are here because this is what we're doing and we would like you to join us. I think for a principal who's very busy, they welcome PTA, but if you could give them the words, if you could give them the letter, if you could give them the message, and do it collaboratively, standing side by side, it would be powerful. But I would like to say, do not spread that rumor so that it makes it to my side, because we still do have PTAs there.
Amy, just to let you know, Project Grad 2015 will include on the contract, once they will be part of, they will be members of PTSA. And we have also put that in the contract, like I said, but it will continue on with their family as well.
That's great. That's great to hear. And we're very thankful to have you as being involved with Project Red for 2015. That's a wonderful thing.
Great. Another question. Yeah, go ahead and back.
First of all, kudos to the panel. It's a pretty difficult position with such a rich and diverse community. Good job. Great to see this in action. My question concerns best practices. I have a GED, a bachelor's, and a master's, so I've seen the full gamut of the education system in about 6 or 7 different states, including the raising children in those states. How are best practices being implemented and tracked? We talked about the one system, but it's diverse not socioeconomically, but in terms of success. So I would like to know, because I'm sure with the panel and others elsewhere, that we have some really good programs, and they're implemented and tracked in one area of the state, and not so much in other areas. And notwithstanding the difficulty of getting that done, how much of an effort is being done to do that, to share, implement, and track best practices?
Right, so you asked about best practices and what we're doing to really glean those practices and use those to improve the larger system. I'm sure you guys all have some thoughts on that. Maybe we'll start with you, Catherine, since you're also with the Charter School Commission, and I'm sure charter schools have some innovative ways that they're improving and reforming education that might not be happening in the regular public schools.
And that's actually one of the roles of charter schools, even in the policies that we have, is that charter schools should be sort of laboratories of innovation, that what they do there that works as a best practice, somehow the next step is to communicate that to the larger system. But let me just step back just a minute. Best practices, there's no long list, although there are many lists, but depending upon the community and the children that you serve, the way you differentiate your instruction for the different needs is best arrived at, I believe, through teaching each other. And one of the schools that I'm working with now has really built into their culture the learning teams model, where they meet, and they built it into their schedule that these teachers meet twice a week. They talk about the students that they're teaching. They talk about the successes that they're having. They talk about the challenges that they're facing. They look at student work, and then they talk about what the teachers that are having good results are doing. And they go into each other's classrooms and watch each other. So I think best practices really come from a much more micro level of teachers working together with common children and identifying what those best practices are with those children, and then practicing so that it's not best practices that are sort of out there, not in their experience, but actually in what they do. So I think a best practice is giving teachers time to focus on the children they're working with and the work that those children are accomplishing, talk about what works, and then go and do that.
I think I take it from a different angle, sir. I look at the opportunities for kids in different communities having access to that level of instruction. When you look at areas that are more disadvantaged population, poor areas, you're going to see a high turnover of teachers versus, your Manoas and Kahala and whatever. There is a difference. There's no question. This article in the paper about Lanai. Can you even talk about best practices when you have so many teachers and the principal teaching in the classroom? How do we adjust that? How do we make sure that every community has access to the best and the brightest? Not just teachers, principals. Because if we keep doing the same old, nothing changes. Can't even begin talking about best practices until you can stabilize your faculty. That has to happen. But we got to look at how we do that. Is it legislature looking at different incentives? Are there opportunities for, for best practices to occur? You got to have some experience. You got to be an experienced teacher to have gone through some trial and error. You can't just come off the university and expect you to have all this bag of tricks. You don't. You really don't. You need that time. But many of these teachers leave after 2 years. So how do we make sure that we keep them there? Can we have incentives like teacher loan forgiveness for teachers who get to the hard to fill school areas? Then we can stabilize the faculty. Then we can really begin to look at best practices and what Captain shares. There's no question. Teachers learn best from teachers. But I guess the next question, how do we systematize that throughout the state? And that's again based on principal leadership. It's also based on leadership at all levels. I like what Catherine really talked about, and I truly believe, and I think all of us here believe, that we've got to build school level leaders, but you can only build school level leaders who have had success or are experiencing success to want them to continue going forward. And it doesn't, again, just happen. You've got to create that environment. And what, number one, teachers are asking for right now? More time. More time to work with each other. More time to get the craft of teaching down. Unfortunately, we've got bills like the instructional minutes that make absolutely no sense when there's no passing time. And, we're squeezing out professional development days for teachers. That is not right. We got to invest in that, and we got to hear your voices. And it comes at the legislature, but it's also at the board. Doesn't make any sense. We got to find we got to find more time, and we got to look at incentives or different ways of getting good teachers, good principals to stay out in the hard-to-fill communities. That, I think, really, to me, addresses best practices, but it starts with building an infrastructure that allows for that first.
And your contract, several years that you have negotiated for the teachers, has something called a professional collaboration day. And that's the time when teachers can share not only within their school, but within their complex about the best practices that have been developed at their school. Professional collaboration day is not a day for the principal to have teachers so that they can do whatever they want. It's a professional collaboration day is the faculty coming together to say, what should we work together on? What should we be doing? And so the best practices gleaned from the model that Catherine described can be shared and kind of cross-pollinated and going across the complex. And then, of course, there's a leadership symposium every year for schools to come and share and present. And so there is what I'll call somewhat of a system that definitely should become more robust. But I believe that the contract negotiated does allow for several days of those opportunities for teachers. which are usually the most powerful days of the school year.
So as a follow-up, and I appreciate all of your answers, but what I hear is there is no systemic, institutionalized, higher level way to capture specific best practices in place among the state's more successful programs. That's not saying that a program is only successful if it has best practices. So when I'm talking specific, something that is labeled, best practices are captured here. Is there nothing like that?
In my area, we don't have a sign that says best practices are captured here, but that's what we collect at our instructional leadership team meetings and our guided visits, and we catalog them and share them, and we call it adding it to your instructional bag of tricks. I don't know of a specific way at the state office that we capture those. I know that my complex area superintendent colleagues have many best practices in their areas that they talk about in their complex area. But I don't know of a repository, if you will, that we put them all in. And I think that many times when teachers read books that they get from ASCD or other organizations, many of the things that they're reading about, they try, and many of the things they read about, they say, hey, I'm doing that already. And so it might be a bit different in Hawaii because we'll have a different cultural bent to what we're trying to do. But I don't think we have one systemic way in the state that we would do that for all islands and areas.
Well, maybe that might be one concrete takeaway, is that we need to systematize those best practices and come up with a list. Sounds like a good idea.
Or having a coordinated professional development plan.
All of these ideas are great, and I'm taking note. But anyways, I think we gotta close up shops for today, but thank you all for coming. We're still in the works and planning our next one, but I hope you guys can all attend our next Education Civil Cafe. Thank you so much for coming.